My name is Charlotte Bizen. I'm the CEO of Radiant Beauty, a cosmetics company. People often describe me as calm and rational. But the events I'm about to share completely shattered my sense of reason. 8 years ago, I married my current husband, Henry. We met at a dinner party hosted by mutual friends and got married after dating for a year. He was an investment advisor earning $150,000 annually. Everyone thought he was an honest and kind husband. I believed that too. When he tearfully pledged his love at our wedding, when we moved into our new home, and on every anniversary. We live in a 3,000 square foot house in the Brookline area of Boston's suburbs. It's a beautiful New England colonial house with white walls and deep green window frames near Chestnut Hill Mall. In the mornings, I prepare breakfast with organic ingredients purchased from Whole Foods, then commute 30 minutes in my BMW X5. Sometimes we spend weekends in Cape Cod. We enjoy gardening conversations with the Browns next door and host annual Christmas parties with the Morrisons across the street. At first glance, it's a life without want. You might even call it enviable. I inherited radiant beauty from my father. After his death, I worked desperately hard. Although I studied business in college, at first, everything was confusing. Still, I leveraged my gentle personality while making tough decisions when needed. We had failures in new product development that caused significant losses. But I never gave up. As a result, I grew the company to $5 million in annual sales. Business with major retail chains like Sephora and Ulta Beauty was going well, and I had earned the trust of our 50 employees. We don't have children. I wanted to focus on work. Henry seemed to understand this. At least on the surface. Occasionally, I noticed shadows of loneliness in his eyes. But each time, he would say, "Charlotte, I support your dreams. We have our own form of happiness." I believed those words and his smile. I interpreted his habit of buying luxury cars and watches as an aspiration for success. As an investment advisor, he needed to keep up appearances. True, his spending had become noticeable lately. But I thought it was just his way of relieving stress. Every Sunday, we attended church and actively participated in local charity events. While gardening was my hobby, Henry diligently helped me on holidays. Our reputation in the neighborhood was excellent, even being called a model for young couples. An ideal marriage. Everyone envied the life we led. But it was all a mask. A perfectly crafted false mask. Henry had a secret he couldn't tell anyone. Our dinner at Abe and Louie's in the Back Bay area. The last night we spent together. With his usual gentle smile, he held my hand. "Thanks to you, I'm living the best life possible." I couldn't have imagined how ironic those words would become. His smile reflected in the red wine was filled with so much deception. That day, I decided to come home earlier than usual. The spring weather invited me to take a walk. At 4 p.m., a time when I would normally be in the middle of a meeting, I was standing at my front door. The house was quiet. Henry's car was in the parking lot, so he must have been home. Noticing a small sound coming from the study, I approached quietly and caught my breath. "Yes, the sale is confirmed. My wife has agreed to it as well." It was Henry's voice on the phone. However, I had never agreed to sell the company. Through the door gap, I could see documents spread on the desk. A contract for selling the company. "Don't worry. The funds will be transferred by tomorrow." I felt the blood drain from my face. But I didn't scream or open the door. Slowly, without making a sound, I backed away. Henry, are you home? I called from the entrance, re-entering the house, desperately suppressing my racing heart. The study door opened, and Henry appeared. His usual smile. But his eyes looked somewhat vacant. Welcome back. You're early today. Yes, I thought I'd come home early for a change. I forced a smile. In these 8 years of marriage, I had never once acted in front of him. But now, this smile became my shield. That night, Henry suddenly brought it up. Charlotte, I actually need to talk to you about the company. What is it? I was thinking about reducing your burden. How about selling the company? For a moment, I felt my hand trembling as I held my coffee cup. But I maintained my composure. Well, but we're doing well now. I don't think we need to consider selling. But you're always tired. This is for our happiness. Those words. Almost like he had rehearsed them. I quietly set down my cup. I'll think about it. As I answered, something inside me changed. Trust turned to suspicion. Affection became caution. From the next day, I began to notice subtle inconsistencies. Multiple unexplained withdrawals from the company's bank accounts. Henry's late-night phone calls increased, and he went out more often. New Rolex, Ferrari. His spending had become excessive. That's a new watch, isn't it? Oh, just a reward to myself for closing a good deal. A casual reply. But thin sweat was forming on his forehead. At the company, Jane, the financial manager, reported suspicious transactions. Did you really approve this transfer instruction? Checking the documents, I saw my signature on them. Clearly forged. At that moment, I made a decision. Just watching wouldn't do, irreversible damage would occur. I needed to take action. First, I arranged for security cameras to be installed. Study, living room, garage. Then, I obtained all bank transaction records. What emerged was evidence of unimaginably large fund transfers. The total already amounted to several $1,000,000. During this time, Henry continued to play the role of a loving husband. On weekends, we went to movies, enjoyed dinner at local restaurants, and attended church. As if nothing had changed. But each time his cell phone rang, I didn't miss the subtle changes in his expression. I had also noticed him sometimes slipping out of the room late at night. And when I found receipts from a luxury spa called Eternal Beauty, new suspicions arose. I decided to hire Jim, a private investigator and former police officer. His first report confirmed my worst fears. The photos showed Henry with a woman. Probably an esthetician from the luxury spa. According to the investigator, their affair had been going on for 3 months. Your husband has already given her gifts worth over $500,000. I nodded quietly at the detective's words. Rather than anger or sadness, clear judgment was needed. Please continue the investigation. Over the next few weeks, while playing the perfect wife, I continued gathering evidence. Bank transaction records, call logs, security camera footage, and hotel receipts. Everything told the story of Henry's betrayal. But this was just the beginning. The real horror was yet to come. Company assets were being drained one after another, revealing embezzlement totaling $3 million. Additionally, gambling debts of $1 million. When I learned these facts, something inside me froze. Still, every morning I prepared breakfast as usual and sent him off with a smile saying, "Have a good day." In the evenings, we watched movies together, and on holidays, we enjoyed barbecues with neighbors. The perfect daily mask. That was the only valuable lesson I learned from Henry. I will take back my life. In front of the mirror, I made a quiet vow. This was no longer just a marital crisis. It was a battle to protect my life, the company I inherited from my father, and the livelihoods of 50 employees. Cynthia's law office was located in Boston's financial district. Opening the heavy wooden door, I was greeted by the serene atmosphere created by her 30-year career. "This is quite a serious situation," she said slowly, removing her glasses after reviewing all the evidence I had prepared. "Fraud by a spouse, embezzlement, illegal asset transfers. Even forgery. There are multiple elements that could constitute criminal charges." By the window where the sun was beginning to set, Cynthia carefully examined each document. I silently watched. "Let's also consult with Tom Brown, the accountant. He's a financial investigation specialist." True to her word, Tom revealed one shocking fact after another. Henry had opened multiple offshore accounts over the past 6 months. Cayman Islands, Singapore, and Switzerland. The cleverly hidden flow of funds gradually revealed its full picture. "Ma'am, this isn't just embezzlement," Tom continued, pointing to a complex fund flowchart. "This is deliberate asset concealment. And quite sophisticated at that. Someone must be advising him." It didn't take long to determine who that someone was. Decisive evidence was found in encrypted emails discovered on Henry's computer. The sender was Leighton, the esthetician woman. "I've arranged everything. The passport is ready, and I've secured a condominium in Bangkok. All that's left is to sell off her company as planned. Our new life is about to begin." As I read on, my hands trembled. Not from anger or fear. A deep sadness quietly enveloped my heart. The GPS tracker records meticulously documented Henry's daily activities. Meetings at the luxury spa, extravagant spending at casinos, and repeated visits to a certain law firm. Everything was for the perfect escape plan. "He has reserved one-way tickets to Bangkok for 2 people, Jim the detective said, bringing new evidence. The plan's full scope finally became clear. The departure date was next week. The day after my company's sale proceeds were scheduled to be deposited. The more I investigated, the more chilling the thoroughness of this plan became. Fake passports, preparations for long-term visas in Thailand, procedures for purchasing local real estate, and detailed steps to transfer all my assets. The message history between Henry and Leighton contained explicit details of that plan." I closed the screen and let out a deep sigh. There was the cold, true face of the man I once loved. My meeting with Detective Mark Davis took place in a room at Boston Police Headquarters. The veteran detective with 30 years of experience quietly listened to my story. "This is clearly criminal. Moreover, extremely sophisticated planning is evident." Davis began formulating a strategy while checking each piece of evidence. Arrest at the airport would be optimal. The evidence is sufficient. However, timing is crucial. As the plan became more concrete, every night I visualized its details while chatting with Henry in the living room. The airport ambush plan. Plainclothes officers waiting before the security checkpoint. Police collaborators positioned at the baggage screening area. And most importantly, carrying everything out without Henry noticing. Then, we'll have the final briefing tomorrow night. After finishing my conversation with Davis, I headed home. While driving, the last 8 years flashed before me like a montage. The vows at our wedding, our first breakfast in the new home, holiday drives, Christmas parties. Were they all just preludes to this conclusion? When I got home, Henry had already returned. He was in a good mood as usual, preparing for his weekend business trip. "Charlotte, you're back. This business trip might be a bit longer." I smiled back. The perfect wife's smile. I had grown accustomed to acting. "Take care on your trip." That night, I began final preparations. Digitizing all evidence documents and backing them up on multiple cloud storage services. Preparing emergency freezing procedures for bank accounts. And confirming the emergency contact network for company employees. Late at night, after finishing my work in the study, I gazed out the window. The quiet suburban New England neighborhood illuminated by moonlight. The day after tomorrow, this tranquility would be greatly disturbed. "Father, I promise I will protect the company." In the quiet night, I made a solemn vow. This was also a battle to fulfill the responsibility I inherited from my father. The next morning, Henry left early for work. "I have an important meeting," he said. I knew he was going to make final account verifications. And to have a final meeting with Leighton. The final confirmation with the police was conducted through an encrypted dedicated line. Coordination with airport staff was complete. Now, we just had to wait for tomorrow. That night, I stopped by the church for the first time in a long while. In the quiet chapel where no one else was present, I prayed for a long time. This is not revenge. It's a fight for justice. I kept telling myself that. When I returned home, Henry was in the middle of packing. Stuffing newly purchased brand-name clothes into a luxury suitcase. To me, who supposedly knew nothing, this would have appeared as mere preparation for a business trip. "Do you need help?" "Thanks, but I'm fine." I felt nothing at his smile. What remained was the final lesson from 8 years of marriage: once trust is lost, it never returns. Before going to bed, Henry unusually embraced me. "Charlotte, you're the best wife." Those words seemed to tremble slightly, as if anticipating tomorrow's events. The next morning began with the usual stillness. When I woke to the sound of the newspaper being delivered at the front door, the clock showed 6 a.m. Henry was breathing steadily in the bed beside me. My husband of 8 years, with whom I had shared the same bedroom. His profile looked like an innocent child who knew nothing. But I now knew the deception lurking beneath that expression. "Henry, it's morning." I woke him with my usual voice. He opened his eyes, looking somewhat sleepy. "Ah, you're taking me to the airport today, right?" "Yes, of course." I toast bread and brew coffee. While opening the honey jar, I noticed my hands were trembling slightly. "This morning's coffee tastes better than usual," Henry said with a smile. "The last breakfast." "What time is your flight again?" 3 p.m. "Then we should leave home by noon." As the clock hands moved forward, the tension increased. Henry was making final checks on his suitcase. The new leather suitcase should contain luxury brand clothing along with forged passports and cash. 11:45 a.m. "I'm ready." "All right, let's go then." On the way to the garage, Henry stopped in front of the roses planted in the garden. These roses were really beautiful. Hearing him speak in the past tense, I felt a slight pain. Yes, they should bloom even more beautifully next year. At those words, he showed a momentarily confused expression. While driving, Henry was more talkative than usual. As if to distract from his nervousness. That recent deal went well. Oh, that's good. Yes, from now on, bigger. He stopped mid-sentence. Only I knew that what came from now on would go in a completely different direction than he imagined. We arrived at Boston Logan International Airport. You can drop me off here. No way. I'll see you inside. At those words, Henry seemed a bit perplexed. But he couldn't say anything. It was a natural offer from an always devoted wife. While heading to the baggage counter, I carefully checked my surroundings. The plainclothes officers weren't visible. That must be their professionalism. Oh, Ms. Layton? I deliberately spoke those words. Henry's back visibly froze. Layton was standing in front of the economy-class baggage counter. She was clearly disturbed upon hearing my voice. I could see her eyes darting behind her luxury brand sunglasses. What a coincidence. Henry, do you know her too? Henry's face grew pale. Sweat appeared on his forehead, and I saw him loosen his tie slightly. Just then, a voice came from behind. Turning around, Detective Davis stood with 6 officers. We need to ask you some questions. Henry's eyes began searching for an exit. But it was too late. The officers had completely surrounded him. What is this? Charlotte? I stepped forward. The emotions I had been suppressing quietly but surely poured out in words. You tried to steal my life. No! This is a misunderstanding. I can explain everything. He desperately tried to defend himself. But no one believed his words anymore. Charlotte, please. Believe me. This was all for our happiness. Henry's desperate cries. Beside him, Layton collapsed to her knees and began crying. The sound of handcuffs being applied. The surprised voices of surrounding passengers. Everything felt like it was in slow motion. You did the right thing, Detective Davis quietly placed his hand on my shoulder. I nodded silently. No tears came. Just a strange sense of liberation, as if awakening from a long nightmare. As I watched Henry being escorted away by the officers, I said a prayer in my heart. This is not the end. It's a new beginning. The first step in reclaiming my life. The spring sunlight was dazzling as I left the airport. The airport building reflecting in the car's side mirror grew smaller and smaller. That evening, I went out to the garden alone. The roses that Henry had bid farewell to were beautifully glowing in the sunset. Next year, they will surely bloom even more beautifully. By then, as my garden alone. Father, I kept my promise. I whispered to the quiet dusk. Tomorrow, a new battle begins. Rebuilding the company, securing the livelihood of employees, and reconstructing my own life. But there's nothing to fear anymore. Truth always prevails in the end. Boston Federal Court. Everything concluded in the historic, imposing courtroom. The end of an 8-year marriage, finalized in such a manner. Looking to the side, Detective Davis gave a small nod. Thanks to perfect evidence and their dedicated investigation, the verdict was as we expected. Henry could not look me in the eye until the end. The man who was once my beloved husband now showed only a withered back. Still, just before leaving the courtroom, he turned around. Charlotte. I'm truly sorry. I didn't answer. There were no words left to say. Stepping out of the courthouse, spring warmth embraced me. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom. The beginning of a new season. Yes, this is not an end, but a beginning. Let's discuss what comes next, Cynthia called out to me. About rebuilding the company and new challenges. I took a deep breath. 1 year later, Radiant Beauty had undergone an amazing transformation. The organic skincare line we launched as a new business received a response beyond expectations. Recognized for environmentally friendly product development and corporate integrity, sales doubled. "Ma'am, we have contact from a new business partner," Secretary Jennifer reported happily. No hesitation was visible in anyone's eyes anymore. The company was steadily moving forward. But my new challenge wasn't just that. The establishment of the Economic Crime Victims Support Center. This organization was created to support people who suffered similar damages, utilizing my experience. Legal advice, psychological counseling, and advice for new beginnings. "Hearing your story gave me the courage to take action," said a woman who came for consultation. I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Being able to turn my experience into hope for someone else. That was a joy beyond imagination. I also began speaking engagements. Corporate compliance training, seminars for female executives, special lectures at universities. My experience seemed to resonate with many people. Strength and kindness are never contradictory. That was the core of my lectures. Facing unreasonable betrayal without giving in to hatred, standing firm with dignity. This stance especially resonated with women. Meanwhile, Henry began serving his sentence in a maximum security prison in Massachusetts. No one visited him. His parents had already passed away, and his friends had abandoned him. According to reports from guards, he had fallen into a deep depression. His investment advisor license was permanently revoked, and he reportedly began studying bookkeeping in prison. All his assets were confiscated, leaving him completely bankrupt. He wouldn't talk about his life after release. Layton showed unexpected changes in the women's prison. She earnestly engaged in rehabilitation programs and obtained a beautician's license. She spoke of wanting to start a new life in a small town in her home state of Maine after release. "She is showing genuine signs of remorse," I heard from the detective in charge. "Perhaps she was trying to atone for mistakes made in her youth." Returning home, the roses in the garden were in full bloom. The flowers I saw on my last day with Henry were now blooming even more beautifully. On weekends, the Browns from next door visited. I was deeply grateful for their unchanged warmth. "Charlotte, I truly admire your strength." "Thank you." But this wasn't just my strength alone. Indeed. Friends, employees, and people watching over me in the community. It was because of so much support that I made it this far. On the study wall hangs a photo of my father. Having protected and further developed the company, I'm sure he would be proud. With each new morning, I think about how life sometimes takes unexpected turns. But what you choose at those turning points determines your subsequent life. Being betrayed, hurt, and still facing forward and continuing to walk. It's never easy. But it's because I chose that path that I am who I am today. The phone rang. A business meeting with a new partner. I took a deep breath and picked up the receiver. Another new step begins from here. Outside the window, the spring breeze gently swayed the rose petals. As if blessing a new life. "Well then, let's go," I whispered quietly. Many difficulties may still await. But I won't hesitate anymore. What this experience taught me is that there's always a chance for a fresh start in life. And seizing that opportunity requires one's own determination and courage. Outside, a new day had begun. I headed to the office with confidence. Today again, I might be able to light a small beacon of hope in someone's life. That is now my greatest joy.